Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Railway Series Reread. Today, we'll be taking a look at the second book, Thomas the Tank Engine. This book was written by Reverend W. Awdry and originally illustrated by Reginald Payne, but later illustrated by C. Reginald Dalby. This book was originally published on October 18th, 1946, but the version I'll be looking at today was published in 2018. Before we get into the stories for today, this is the first book that includes a foreword, which is just a little paragraph that introduces the book and hints at the stories and what's going to happen. But this one is not addressed to the audience. This one is specifically addressed to Christopher Awdry. It says, "Dear Christopher, here is your friend Thomas the Tank Engine. He wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world. These stories tell you how he did it. I hope you will like them because you helped me to make them. Your loving Daddy." And this foreword is actually a bit familiar to me. It might be familiar to you because this was used at the beginning of a lot of season 8 and other new series episodes, I believe. On TV, they had a little segment where the book opens and someone reads this. But yeah, that's the first foreword. And it hints at Thomas the Tank Engine and how he gets out of the station yard, which is what this book is about. This book follows the story of Thomas and how he grows to be a better person, or better engine, I guess. Our first story is Thomas and Gordon, which basically follows the story of how Thomas is kind of a jerk and learns to be less of a jerk as the story goes on. Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. We all know where this is going. 6 small wheels, short stumpy funnel, short stumpy boiler, short stumpy dome. We meet Thomas. We learn that his job is to get the coaches ready for the big engines to take on their long journeys. When they come in, he pulls them away so the big engines can go and rest. And he's also pretty cheeky. And despite only being a little shunter, he thinks nobody works as hard as he does. And he likes to tease engines and play tricks on them, such as waking them up when they're sleeping after their long day of work. "Peep, peep, 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 peep. Wake up, lazy bones," he would whistle. "Why don't you work hard like me?" he says to somebody that's taking a nap after working just as hard, if not harder than him. And he laughs rudely at them and goes to find more coaches. So this kind of goes on. That's just what Thomas does. But it all changes when one day he does that to Gordon. And Gordon, instead of going back to sleep, he thinks about how he can get back at Thomas. I love this illustration. Gordon looks so terrified. And Thomas is like whistling almost. But Gordon, he's scared out of his mind. So one day Thomas wakes up and his fire won't start. And it's nearly time for the express. Eventually he gets going. He bumps the coaches and they get mad at him. And it's not going well. Thomas comes into the station. Gordon tells him to hurry up. Thomas says, "Hurry yourself." And Gordon says, "Yes, I will." So from that point, we know Gordon's up to something. Thomas gets the coaches ready and is behind them. And everybody gets in because Gordon says, "Get in quickly, please." And Gordon takes off. So Thomas is stuck at the back because he helps push the engines forward. We learn about that. He helps to push the train forward to get it going. But he's always uncoupled. However, Gordon starts so fast that they don't uncouple Thomas. And he is dragged down the main line. And he's saying, "Stop, stop." And Gordon's laughing and saying, "Hurry, hurry." And he just goes faster and faster. Thomas is running out of breath and his wheels hurt, but he has to keep going. He says, "Oh, I'll never be the same again. My wheels will be quite worn out." And yeah, he's sad and going too fast, but he deserves it. He's a jerk. Eventually, they stop at the next station. Everyone laughs at Thomas. He goes to get some water, and Gordon says, "Oh, now you know what hard work means, don't you?" And Thomas goes home very slowly and carefully, and he's very careful afterwards to never be cheeky to Gordon again. This story is used as the pilot or the first episode of Thomas and Friends, and it works well in that context because the show's about Thomas, so the first story, we gotta set him up. But I like this. Thomas kind of feels a bit more rude in the book version to me. I don't know why. He just does. But he learns his lesson. Don't be a jerk, I guess. My favorite illustration is definitely the one where Thomas is waking up Gordon and Gordon's all surprised. But there's plenty more to go through. There's not much I can really say about this story, just because these early ones, I'm so used to the TV series version, and I've read this one twice now, and then a third time in this video, I guess, scanning through it. And there's nothing much that really sticks out to me. The writing, it's written well, it's a good little story, so let's just go on to the next one. Our second story is Thomas's Train. This one's dumb. Thomas often grumbled because he was not allowed to pull passenger trains. Everybody says he's too impatient, and that's kind of the moral of this story, don't be impatient. One night, Thomas is in the sheds with Henry, who pulls the first train in the morning, but he's ill. Henry doesn't feel good, and the workmen are trying to get him to feel better. And Thomas's first thought is, if Henry's ill, I get to pull the train in the morning. Doesn't even care that Henry's sick. At least it doesn't appear to be that way. Thomas, in the morning, gets the coaches fussing about it, how they've got to get going, and there's plenty of time. Goes to the platform, and he's just so impatient. His driver tells him not to be impatient. Eventually, people get on board, the guard gets on board, the porter bangs the doors. Henry doesn't show up, and Thomas just gets more and more excited. I really like this illustration. We see the inside of a station, and the train's getting ready. The doors are open in the back coach, and they're getting the luggage and stuff in. And Thomas looks like he's talking to someone, maybe his driver, because his driver was telling him not to be impatient. So, yeah, I like this illustration a lot. Eventually, the fat director from the previous book comes out of the office to see what's going on, and the guard says, Henry's not here. Find another engine. Well, all we have is Thomas. Well, looks like you'll have to do it, Thomas. Thomas gets to the front of the train, and again, he's too impatient and won't listen to what anybody is saying. Now, what happened next, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train. Perhaps Thomas was too impatient to wait till they were ready. Or perhaps his driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started. People shouted and waved, but he didn't stop. So Thomas just goes, without his coaches. And people are waving and shouting at him. And he says, "Oh, Henry says this is hard. It's easy to pull a train." And he says, "Hurry, hurry, hurry," to pretend to be like Gordon. How does he not realize that he's not pulling a train? He pulls coaches and pushes trucks and stuff in the yard every day, so he knows what it feels like, the weight behind him of the train. And he's just pulling nothing. He's just going light engine all by himself and thinks he's pulling a passenger train. It makes no sense to me. For a series about, railway realism, this doesn't feel very realistic. Surely Thomas would have realized. But, I don't know, it's just a gripe. I feel like a lot of people have pointed this out over the years. But yeah, how does he not realize that he's not pulling the train? Eventually he goes past the signal box, and people they're shouting at him. He says, "Oh, they're just pleased to see me." But eventually the signal turns to danger, and Thomas gets stopped and blows an angry peep peep on his whistle. A signalman runs up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" Thomas is like, "I'm pulling a train, can't you see?" But he asked, "Where are your coaches?" Thomas looked back. "Why, bless me," he said, "if we haven't left them behind." And Thomas gets sent to go get his coaches, and I love this illustration. Well, it says he's about to cry, but it looks like he's just cringing so hard. Like he realized how big of a mistake he made, and that the entire time people were trying to get his attention, they weren't praising him or anything, they were just upset. And he looks like he's just cringing so hard. He's so upset. Eventually, he gets back to the station, and all the passengers are complaining to the fat director. There's this huge mob on the platform. Thomas comes back, and they see that he's so sad, and they're like, "Just not cross anymore." I'd be pretty cross, but whatever. This time, Thomas really pulls the train, and for a while after that, people laugh at Thomas and say, "Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train but forgot about the coaches." My favorite illustration was the part where Thomas was cringing. I also like when the luggage was being loaded. In terms of the writing, good, nothing to point out. In terms of the story in general, I don't get it. How did Thomas not realize that he wasn't pulling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 coaches? I don't know. It was adapted in the show too. This was like episode 5. I don't understand. He was just so impatient that he doesn't realize that he's... Whatever. We have more to get through. Speaking of Thomas pulling things, the next story is Thomas and the trucks. We learn that at night Thomas grumbles in the sheds saying that he wants to go see the world, but no one really cares. until one night Edward comes back and has some trucks to take. He feels sorry for Thomas and says, "If you take the trucks instead, then I'll do your work in the yard." Thomas says, "Thank you, that'll be nice." And in the illustration, we see that Edward's, offering the job to Thomas. Thomas is happy, and Henry is still sick next to them in the shed. After a couple days now, he's still not feeling very well. So that sucks. The drivers agree, everything's going well, and Thomas goes to the station to get Edward's trucks. And we get kind of a recap on what trucks are and how they behave. How they're silly and noisy, and they don't attend to what they're doing, or listen to their engine if they get bumped into each other, and they just get bumped and they scream and shout. So it sets up again that trucks are kind of a problem, in case we forgot from the last book. And they play tricks on an engine who isn't used to them, aka Thomas. Thomas moves them around in the yard, but he's never pulled a train of trucks before. So that's how they can really mess with an engine. Just like last time, Thomas is too impatient and also excited to pull a train. He isn't extremely impatient, because he actually takes the train with him this time. He doesn't start before it's coupled up, but still, he's a little impatient. Thomas starts off, and the trucks are screaming at him because their couplings are tightening, telling him to wait. But he doesn't wait. He just says, "Come on, come on." Kind of like Gordon again, trying to hurry along. Thomas gets out of the yard with his train, and yeah. This next illustration is really nice. It's Thomas rushing out of Henry's tunnel with his train, which is also the cover of the book. And it's kind of like a famous illustration from this series. And he rushes through the station and over bridges and through the tunnel. And he's just having a great time from the looks of it. And eventually they get to Gordon's Hill from the first book again. Although it just says the hill where Gordon had stuck in the book, but we all know it's Gordon's Hill. The driver shuts off steam at the top and begins to put on the brakes, telling Thomas to go steady. Thomas does not go steady. The trucks surge down the hill with Thomas pushing him all the way down, going faster and faster. The driver can't stop them, Thomas can't stop, and they're just pushing and laughing. And Thomas tries his best to stop them, but he can't. That's what he gets for bumping them, I guess. About half of the story is just dialogue back and forth between Thomas and the trucks, which is nice. I mean, that's kind of how the story flows, really. He's telling them to stop, and they're telling him to go. Well, telling him that they are going, not going to stop. Stop pushing, he hissed, but the trucks would not stop. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. Just like that, because they're not stopping. Well, actually they are on this page. Thomas rattles into the next station and screeches on his brakes and goes into a siding and stops at the buffers. Shuts his eyes, he's all scared, and when he opens them, the fat director is standing there right in front of him. And he asks, "What are you doing here?" Thomas says he's brought Edward's trucks. "Well, why'd you come in so fast?" And Thomas says, "I didn't mean to, I was pushed." "Haven't you pulled trucks before?" "No." "Then you've a lot to learn about trucks, little Thomas." And the fat director reiterates what we heard earlier, that they're silly and noisy, and we kind of just saw that over the entire story about how they shoved Thomas down the hill. But the fat director isn't really mad. He just says, after pushing them here for a few weeks, you'll learn almost as much as Edward, and you'll be a really useful engine. And I think that's the first time we get the phrase really useful engine, which is said all the time in these books and in the show. But the fat director isn't mad. He's like, "Okay, well, just push trucks for a few weeks and you'll be good to go." So, yeah, the trucks got to their destination, I guess, but a little too fast. Still, the fat director kind of takes pity on Thomas, which is nice. We see throughout the stories that he's not mean. He is, the big boss, but he's not a jerk. He's stern, but he's fair. There's not much I can really say about this story. Again, I'm just used to the TV series version, but I enjoyed reading it. I enjoy the illustrations a lot. Again, with all these, they're all pretty great. And yeah, it's a simple story. Thomas is a little impatient. He goes too fast, and he stops, and they say, "Hey, it's okay. You just gotta practice." And that's that. So Thomas does practice, which leads us into our next and final story, Thomas and the Breakdown Train. Every day the fat director came to the station to catch his train, and he always said hello to Thomas. And Thomas looks happy by the looks of it. This is kind of a weird face, but either way, there's lots of trucks in the yard that Thomas sorts out every day, pushing and pulling them, just not taking them out on the main line, because we saw what happened last time. The fat director had been kind to him, and Thomas wants to learn all about trucks and be a really useful engine. He's not a jerk, and he's not super impatient anymore. He wants to learn, he wants to do his best, and that's exactly what he does in this story. But there's this one siding in the yard where there are some trucks that Thomas was told he mustn't touch. There was a small coach, some flat trucks, and two queer things his driver called cranes. I guess now is a good time to mention that. These books are pretty old, so some of the language is outdated. Like, I don't think nowadays you would look at a crane and describe it as queer. That just doesn't... that word is... Several words that get used mean different things now or associated with different things now. So, yeah, the word queer is used a ton in these books as like odd or strange or weird, I guess. But again, these books are a product of their time, I suppose. I'm just pointing that out, I guess. That counts as me talking about the writing, I suppose. We learn that this queer-looking thing is the breakdown train. When there's an accident, the workmen get into the coach, the engine takes them to the accident, and the cranes are used to lift things and clear the line. And Thomas just kind of looks at it. Little does he know that one day he'll be using it. One day, Thomas was in the yard. We don't know how much time has passed between Thomas seeing the breakdown train and the accident that's about to happen. So, yeah, it could be any time. As long as it took him to get more experience with trucks, I guess. But there is a new engine rushing through the yard with the train, going way too fast. This is James. The engine, and then in parentheses we get a new one called James, was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire, and smoke and sparks streamed out on each side. So this is James, and his first introduction to us is him screaming in pain and going way too fast and crashing and flying off the rails. Nice. As most people know, James is painted black at first and is later repainted red. So that was something that wasn't in the TV series originally until the adventure begins. But yeah, he's black at first. The trucks push him, and as we've seen in the past story, they can be real troublemakers, and that's what they do. Unlike Thomas, who was able to stop at buffers, James isn't, and he just flies off the rails. Thomas says he'd like to teach those trucks a lesson, and he does. A bell rings in the signal box, and a man comes out and says, "James is off the line, the breakdown train, quickly." So Thomas goes over to the breakdown train, couples up, and takes it to the scene of the accident. And he works hard trying to get it there, and he says, "Hurry, hurry, hurry," like Gordon, like how he'd been imitating him previous times in the book. But this time he's being serious because it's an emergency. There's a crash, he has to get there, so he actually is trying to hurry. So that just shows a little bit about how he's grown. And he gets to the scene of the accident, where we see James, who's off the line, and so are most of his trucks, piled up in a heap. And James is in a field, and there's a cow looking at him. Actually, no, there's two cows. And that's kind of funny, as an illustration. So his crew is feeling him all over, and they say it's not James's fault, it's his wooden brakes that they said were no good. If they're no good, then why didn't you fix them before this? This is exactly why you want to fix your brakes. This goes for anyone. Whether you're an engine driver or, you have a car. If something's wrong with your brakes, get it looked at, get it fixed. So Thomas comes up with a breakdown train, and the men set to work. While Thomas pulls away the unhurt trucks backwards and forwards all day, getting them out of the accident, and he's bumping them, saying, "Oh, this serves you right. This will teach you a lesson." And they say, "Yes, it will. Yes, it will," in a sad, groany, creaky sort of voice. So Thomas was right. He did get to teach them a lesson. And he looks pretty upset. Well, not upset in this illustration, per se. He's just kind of cross with the trucks, and rightfully so. Because Thomas didn't get hurt by the trucks, but he was learning how to handle them, and the new guy got hurt by them, and he's not too happy about that. So eventually, they mend the line and leave the broken trucks alone, and put James back on the rails with the cranes. But James can't move, so Thomas helps him back to the shed. This is a nice illustration. There are people waving at Thomas and all happy, but this time they actually are waving and cheering for him because Thomas saved the day. He's not, in a hurry thinking that he's pulling a train when he's actually not. So, again, just little changes throughout the book of Thomas's arc, how he becomes a better engine. He gets back to the shed with James, and the fat director's there, and is very pleased with him. It says James will have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and Thomas will have a branch line all to himself, and Thomas is very happy about that. They don't tell us what a branch line is in this story, so, it's just a line, part of the railway that's not on the main line, but if they would have maybe said a line about that, then that'd be nice. Although we do learn eventually a bit more about the branch line. But Thomas is very happy. He goes backwards and forwards all day with his 2 new coaches, taking passengers, and he's just very happy about that. He's never lonely, though, because there's a junction from the main line to the branch line, which we'll see a lot in later stories, where other engines pass by. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. And Gordon's always rushing by the express, and he always says poop poop at Thomas, and Thomas says peep peep in return. And that's where our story ends. Again, on a happy note, just like last time. But this feels a bit happier, because we stuck with Thomas throughout the entire book. Last time it was Edward, and then Edward and Gordon, and then Henry, and then all 3 of them. But there was a main character throughout the entire book that we watched go through an arc, and it's just, it's enjoyable. It feels really conclusive at the end, It's not the conclusion, though. There are tons more stories about Thomas, but in terms of this book and us meeting Thomas, learning who he is, and then learning how he becomes better, it's very enjoyable. This was a nice read. I knew all the stories going in, and I feel like half of us, or half the people that would get this probably know as well from the show, but again, it's a good read. The books just hit different, I guess, than the show. People say the book's better than the movie, and I'm starting to see what they mean now that I've read the first 26 of these things. But yeah, in terms of writing, not much really stuck out to me, I guess. I like the dialogue a lot between Thomas and the trucks, but there's not much to say, really. This is just it's kind of simple. There's a bit more going on, though, with Thomas changing and growing, but yeah, this was our first book with a true main character, and I like it. The next book also has a main character, and I like it as well. It might be one of my favorite books out of this series. So, yeah, overall, good book. I think I like this a little more than 3 Railway Engines, just because we get that central character, and there's a clear character arc. There were arcs in the last one, a little bit. Henry learns to not be vain and stuff, but I don't know, Thomas was just a bit more enjoyable for me. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the second book of the Railway series, Thomas the Tank Engine, and yeah, good book. Pretty much all these are good books. Anyway, I hope to see you next time with the 3rd book, James the Red Engine, and yeah, I'm Nick TF89, and I hope to see you again soon.